Oh, did that do that for everyone?
Yeah.
Yes. What is
Oh,
that?
I didn't know you could do that.
How can you do
I
that?
kind of
I
I kind of
used
hit that. I
what?
didn't know what it was. I just pressed the button to try it. So
But you know which button to press.
it's called together mode.
Oh,
Where
I
is Joel? You didn't
well,
bring in Joel.
I'm over here.
Yeah, he's there. Yeah. It's like an outdoor amphitheater or
Oh,
something. I don't know.
Looks good.
I can
But
manage that.
yeah, I just wanted a view where I could see everybody, so I didn't know what it would do, but now we're here.
Oh, Rainbow, tell us what's up. What are you doing?
So what's up? So yeah, I'm not at the airport this time, so I'm kind of staying put in Dallas, Texas. Um, I am learning guitar right now, so I'm actually sitting with my guitar here practicing. I don't know if it shows up, but yeah, there.
And what kind of guitar do you have?
It is just regular like acoustic guitar. It's a Yamaha. That's all I know about it.
Okay.
But it was kind of yeah, it was kind of gifted to me from a former bandmate, and so I've always been a drummer in these different bands that I've been in, and so I've always been around guitar players. But now during the pandemic, I feel like I finally got this guitar and started actually spending time with it to learn, and it's been yeah, kind of.
What happened?
I believe he accidentally got out.
Well, I'm surrounded by guitarists here in this room.
Where is he? Vanya, you have been recording our first beginning of the call too?
No.
And good.
Okay. What's going on here?
I don't know what's going on.
Sounds like you went on mute. Rainbow, are you on mute?
No, because it said rainbow.
No, you dropped out.
No, it said. I got a pop up that said that someone else muted my microphone.
Now,
Maybe we're getting hacked.
but where is Rainbow?
I'm in Texas.
No,
Oh,
but where are you in our call?
Oh, I don't. I said I got booted off, but now I'm back on.
Well, we don't see you.
I see him.
Let's see.
Can we go back to a regular viewing so I can see better?
Uh, yeah. Let's see. Speaker.
Can we come out from the trees?
I feel like a mushroom. This is so funny.
Should we go out, all of us, or what?
Yeah,
Maybe
it's being
we
weird
stop
now. It won't
recording.
let me do my camera.
Huh.
I might have to maybe like hang up and try to come back in or something.
Okay, try that.
Now we have two Joes, two Ninas, two Vanya, three Vanyas, three Ninas.
What? I don't
um,
do that.
I have a mosaic instead of a call.
Really?
Yeah, I
I'm
have.
trying to change it, but I still can't see rainbow. Like, is your camera on?
Rainbow is not anywhere.
Why don't we reinitiate the call?
Yeah,
Maybe.
let's go off and then come
Go
back.
off and Vanya, can you just redo it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hanging up.
kind of like a left brain, right brain type of concept here. But yeah, it's one of my favorite paintings, as you can probably imagine. It's cool.
She is an
Yeah,
artist.
she's like a neurosurgeon and artist.
Interesting combination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about your activities in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Dallas, Texas. So I do have my own podcast. So I do a lot of time on that. I interview people. Yeah, if any of you want to do that podcast someday, you're welcome to be on that show. But yeah, I'd like to interview people and kind of get their life stories and see if people will talk about maybe things that make them uncomfortable or mistakes that they made, and kind of, yeah, just my theme with that podcast is to show that we're all flawed in some way. We all have flaws. So that's kind of my angle with that whole podcast.
And how do you go about the interview process in such a way that people are comfortable revealing
Yeah, sometimes I have to
big
kind of like,
mistakes they've made?
yeah, sometimes you have to trick people and sort of like take them along a path of conversation where they start to feel more comfortable like owning up to certain things. Because if you ask someone right off the bat, hey, what's something that you messed up, my experience is that they're usually not willing to jump right into that.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know, I'm maybe from doing this show so much, I've become someone who's pretty ready and willing to admit those things or share those things. But yeah, I was interviewing a lady just recently who said, she's like, oh, yeah, I've never made a mistake in my life. And I was like, okay, let's
Yeah.
let's both think about that. Obviously, that cannot be true. So, yeah, but with some people, I start at that wall and I just get nothing. And then after kind of talking a little bit more and just talking about the idea of failure and looking at other failures of other people, then it starts to trigger for people like, oh, yeah, this was something where I also made a huge mistake or a small mistake. And yeah, there's an episode with Roger that I'm editing. So that one's coming out soon. Uh, this group might enjoy listening to that. So, yeah.
So does he tell about all his big mistakes and small mistakes?
Oh yeah, he shared some things with me on that podcast that even I've known him for a very long time, but I never knew these details. So it's a very interesting episode. It was one of my favorite interviews that I did because, especially with somebody who I knew, it's like you think you know someone, and then you sit down in a different context and you find out so much more about them. Just very interesting, and he's obviously very, well spoken, well traveled, and just has all kinds of experiences. And I interviewed him at his office, where if you've ever been there, you can also see some of the artwork that he made and that his father made as well. So it was kind of cool to have that in the context of the interview. Um, that's one thing I've learned as well, is if the place where you're meeting somebody really can affect the conversation you have with them. So like if we're meeting on Skype, that will have a certain impact on our conversation. Um, and if I'm with you in your home, sitting at your kitchen table, we might have a very different conversation. So I think that's something I'm pretty new with this podcast. It's only been going for a few months and a few episodes, but that's what I'm starting to enjoy about it as well. Is it takes me to different places wherever I conduct the interviews. And yeah, sometimes I've been in people's homes, at their offices, or just at a setting where they feel comfortable and they feel safe to talk. And I think that's what makes it, yeah, kind of an interesting journey for me.
What have you learned about, I mean, so far about uh, or so how is it? Yeah. Have you any takeaways at this point where you can sort of like more general observations about humanity, people, individuals?
Yeah, I don't know if I've done enough to really make like any big, insights about the human condition. But I think that, I think the act of talking about the mistake starts to change the person in that moment, because now you're accepting it and now you are speaking it. And that sort of, I think, in a lot of these interviews, I found as soon as we pass that point in the conversation, like the personality of the person kind of changes and opens up a way more. And they sort of feel liberated, I think, that, okay, I've gotten that out of the way. I've shared the blunder that I made. And now I can talk about anything and just feel a lot more
Yeah.
free. So that's one thing I've learned. Yeah.
In a way, they clean the slate or confess.
I guess it's like I'm having this
You've
like
got to
confessional
confess.
booth. I never thought of it like that, but because I've never been in that, like in a church or anything. But maybe it has that effect. Like maybe I'm
Yeah, I
a
don't know.
little bit getting to play that role for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, so maybe I'd like to hear your thoughts about just failure in general. It's like, why is it so important? What's the deal?
Yeah. So,
What's
and
the
this is
deal
like
with
to,
failure?
yeah, there's a great quote that stayed with me from one of my interviews. And this woman said that if you're not taking risks, then you're not living. So I feel that failure sort of um, is a natural consequence of taking those risks. So it's kind of becomes like a way to measure, like, are you really taking advantage of this life that you have? And if you have no failures, then I would sort of argue that, yeah, maybe you're not experiencing the whole range of what life can offer you. Um, yeah, that's kind of how I think about failure now.
But the downside is your mistakes and failures can cause harm to other people.
Yeah, that's
It's not
that's
just
very
about
true too.
you and your conquering your past or your coming to grips with one's identity, I guess you'd say. But but you know your actions have consequences in the world, and um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's certainly the other side of it, which is tricky, right? Because I think about, a lot of the activism work that I do, and like I always wonder, like if I were to interview like a police officer who's killed somebody, you know, am I willing to just say, "Oh, well, good for you. You took a risk and now you learned from it." And it's a very different context all of a sudden. So I think that um yeah, I haven't really like reconciled how those types of errors or mistakes that end up, could be something that killed somebody else, or like you said, just caused harm to somebody else in general. Um, yeah, I haven't really
Can't
reconciled that. Like, I don't
imagine
know.
that there is. I can't imagine there is anybody who did not have in the course of his or her life make mistake. It's just the scale is different, the impact which this uh, mistake has caused. But everybody, I think, everybody, no matter where you live, no matter what social situation you live, I just can't imagine anybody. I
Yeah.
just can't even think of all the mistakes I made in my life.
So just yesterday, I was driving and I was parallel parking, and so I kind of hit the car in front of me because I missed, and so that's like my most recent unforced error. And so I'd never done that before, and I ended up, it was a parked car that I hit, so it's clearly pretty, it's all on me. There's no fault of anybody else. And then I was like, what do I do? So I had to go on Google and see like what are the rules in my state, and you have to, leave your insurance information and whatnot. Um, and so I was out there doing all of that, and I was kind of nervous because I was like, I've never been in this situation before. What are the possible, consequences for me? Um, and then, yeah, as well as, the damage done to the other car. And so, yeah, it's, nobody physically got hurt, but yeah, now it kind of became a whole experience for me to go through that. Um, and so, yeah, there's small sort of errors like that, uh, which I would say there's something very interesting about those too, because it shows that even though I wasn't, taking some like incredible risk and learning from it in that sort of way, it still kind of points to the flawed nature of humans and the flawed nature of even the tools that we make. Like the car, for example, is made by humans, and it doesn't have its own mechanism yet to, prevent me from hitting that car when I park. Although I'm sure some cars now have that, but I think it's interesting. Even these small kind of mundane errors are just nice reminders that we are not functioning perfectly um, all the time. So,
Most of the time.
Well, I have an analogy I want to share, and I'm just kind of curious. This has just popped into my head. Um, a few years ago, I was doing research on navigation and doing some projects on automated navigation. And one of the places I looked to was entomology, and looking at, because on my back patio one day I saw this stream of ants, crawling across the patio. It was like a highway of ants moving along. And I just started looking at it thinking, how in the hell do those ants organize themselves to do that, And so I started reading about it, and, and it, all the obvious things, about scent and how they, following, the pathway and all that stuff. But the closer I looked at it, what I found was that it's actually, I'm going to put it in the language we're using, they travel as a series of mistakes. In other words, the closer you get to examining them, the more you zoom in on the individual ant, you basically see that it's moving around almost randomly, poking into things and bouncing off stuff and turning around and going forward and going backward. It's really a trial and error mechanism. And it's only through the trial and error that they move forward. And the analogy here is the small mistakes that you're describing might be something similar in humans, as humans propel themselves forward in life, is that you can't move, you can't be human, you can't move forward unless you're continuously making errors, continuously making mistakes. And so it's just something that's inherent to being alive. I was trying to think, what's the smallest mistake I've made in the last 15, 20 minutes?
sure.
I'm sure there is one, and I'll come up with it in just a second.
Yeah, like
I overheated my coffee in the microwave.
Nice.
Right before we started the call, and I couldn't drink it because I put it to my lips and it burned my lips.
Yeah, and now it's a little course correction can come from that, or
right,
a slight trial and error. Yeah.
Ever so slight course correction that determines the destiny of where things go. So, rather than suck down an entire cup of coffee in one gulp, I'll just sip it slow.
Sure.
My
Yeah,
cat.
that gives me a good idea. Like when I'm doing these interviews, I should ask people, like, give me in the last half hour, what was your mistake? Give me in the last day, kind
Yeah,
of like play with the timeline like that.
yeah.
That would be kind of
And
fun.
my guess is that as you stretch the timeline out, the mistakes get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and
Yeah,
monumental.
that correspond.
When you shrink it, they get really small.
But maybe if you ask me of a mistake I've done in the last few days, the 9th of November, I would tell you that I tried lifting how do you call it? I don't know. And I got my finger broken. That's a big mistake.
Yeah, that would be an outlier for like the 3-day time constraint. Broken bones over here. That's her theme.
Yeah. Nina, what's your most recent mistake?
I don't know. Today I am a little off, more than other times because of this. I had a little eye surgery yesterday, and because of that, I am in a cloud more than other times. I'm always in a cloud, but now I'm deeper.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, if you just had eye
The
surgery,
eye surgery.
The
and
mistake
you
was
can't
the
see
surgery.
perfectly, maybe you're running into things. Who knows? Pressing the wrong buttons on your computer.
That was it.
Actually, that's what I did when I first joined the Skype call. I would consider that when I changed the mode for everyone and didn't realize that was going to be taking us outdoors to that scene.
But because you did that, it changed the course of the conversation, you know?
This is an eye that I painted on my guitar. Yeah, I've started painting on my guitar. I paint on everything pretty much that I have now.
And why? Why do you paint on things?
I think that I don't know. I only started doing this like after I was hospitalized last year, and something maybe coming off of all those drugs from the hospital like got me to like express in a different way. I never was like this before then. I mean, I used to kind of doodle if I was taking notes in class or something, but not just painting on everything like how I do now. So I think there's something very liberating about it, and being able to play with colors and just be in a judgment free kind of mindset that I'm not selling this painting. I'm not doing it for anybody else. I'm not taking instructions from anybody. So I think I love being in that mind frame. I'm sure everybody loves that to some degree, but I think, painting has become such I don't know, a convenient way for me to get into that creative energy.
Do you make mistakes in your painting?
No, they're all perfect. They're all
yeah.
all perfect at the right when I touch the paint.
That's the danger of the artist.
Yeah, it is kind of hard for me to admit that I've like messed up in some painting, because I feel like there's like a truth in whatever comes out in the colors that I end up using and whatever I end up creating. I feel like is sort of like a pure form of expression. But yeah, maybe it's also just like a stream of failure could be viewed as that too. It's just instead of stream of consciousness, just stream of failure. And
I'm kind of curious about all this, because it's sort of leading down to how you think and how you manifest your professional practice. And so I'm going to make the same question about activism. I mean, can you do activism without making mistakes? Does it fall into the same category as kind of art thinking, where art, quote, about truthfulness it's mistakeless, but activism may have some of that kind of similar quality to it, when it's approached from a creative framing. How important is it to make mistakes as an activist?
I mean, it's very, very similar, I would say, especially the way I approach it, artwork and activism, and sometimes, of course, combining the two. and doing, public art, maybe that's in defiance to uh, some state organization, for example. But yeah, I think I've made a lot of mistakes in activism, and I kind of hinted in the last week's conversation about victim worship, which I think, yeah, there's kind of this spectrum of like, there victim blaming, and then there's like victim worship on the other side. So I think it becomes very uh, interesting territory emotionally and spiritually once you get really deeply involved with a particular cause or a case or something like that, because all of those states of mind end up influencing, I think, the artwork that I end up producing or that the community ends up producing. And I've found that maybe the intention I went in with has now drastically become something else by the end of the project or by the end of the campaign or the activism project, whatever it might be. Like right now, the there's a trial going on of another like Minnesota police officer who killed a black man, and I was really involved in activism after that incident happened, and now I'm watching the trial go on, and I think all of those all of those experiences I had during the protests and making the artwork and doing a lot of activism uh, is now. I mean, I can't watch this trial and be unbiased. I mean, I would be a completely terrible candidate for the jury, because at least in this way that the American court system works, yeah, I don't think they would want me on that jury, knowing that I've painted murals of the victim and done things like that. So it that's where I feel like, yeah, it totally changes you, getting involved in something like that. And the some of the failure side of it, I guess you're asking about. I think um, yeah, there's okay. So going further into like victim worship, what I'm talking about, where that becomes a problem, is, for example, uh, you end up really taking the side of the victim and creating and producing artwork and organizing community around that. Then you might come to find out later that, especially when money gets involved, and let's say funds are being raised for the family members, then later you find out, oh, there's like a big portion of the community that has some outlying issue with one of the family members. And this happens like all the time. It's like, oh, well, a bunch of people in the community who I assumed would just support this family because of what they've been through, it's actually not so simple. They have a history with certain people in this family, and they feel different people feel differently about them. And uh, I ended up kind of walking into some traps where I thought, well, yes, I'll absolutely, like, someone approached me and said, why don't we like help raise some funds for this, or let's support this fundraiser with our artwork, because we're drawing a lot of attention based on this artwork. So why don't we also put a link to their fundraiser? And then come to find out, there's backlash from people who were originally supporting the artwork, and now they see that link is over there, and they're like, oh, hold on a second, because if your whole artwork was just to help send funds to this person, then I want to have nothing to do with it. And by the way, now I don't support you as an artist. I don't support the message that you're sending. So it very quickly, I mean, I literally walked into a trap like that. And it totally changed me, because it completely caught me off guard. I mean, I have people, while I'm working on that public art installation, coming up and telling me like, oh, you must be like sent from God. Like, this is what the neighborhood really needed. Like, we love what you're doing. And just, I'm getting that level of praise. And then the exact opposite from people who are in that same community, who I would have expected to have their support as well. But that was, now I realize, me being naive, me kind of walking into a situation where I ended up making so many assumptions that I was really just kind of building a weird trap for myself at the same time. But yeah, I'm sure anyone who's done artwork and then you're not doing it for money and then later money gets involved, it always pretty much screws things up one way or another. And, you know, friendships get broken over that. People get mad about it. And it's like, wait a second, like, what were we doing here in the first place? We got to come back to that source of inspiration, because now we've been talking about money and we've gone astray from whatever the original thing was that brought us together. So
yeah, I think that was a really interesting description of the complexity, involved in this kind of practice. But I think it's a shared sensibility that many artists have in their production process, where they, you think you're doing something for one reason, and then it's read differently by the audience, and then that goes back. Obviously, you have to talk about intentionality and what was the intent of the artist in that process, but intent doesn't always match up with outcome.
right,
Very
yeah,
often.
like there was a this is a very specific example of the same thing, and so how can I don't want to bore you with all the details of this particular case, but so I was making a public artwork in honor of this victim of police violence, and so I used like a certain symbol that would match up with the victim. And then I finished the piece. It was actually a group project. Like, we finished this piece, and the mother of the victim came like many months later, and we got to meet with her, and she gave her opinion of the piece. So it was like, whoa, this is the real, the ultimate judge of this work. Like, if she's on board with it, then we've done it justice, and we've done honor to the victim. And so she gave some comments that she liked it, but she said it would have been nicer if you used her son's favorite colors. Okay. And so she told us those colors are red and black, and she would like to incorporate more of those colors, she's like, yeah, if you end up kind of working on it more, I would like to see those colors too. That would mean a lot to me. And this was like a private conversation that nobody else heard. And so, but a lot of people knew I was involved in it. And so, again, so another few months passed by, and some other group of artists have come and redone the entire piece in red and black. Okay, so there was a period where it was completely being like changed and redone by people in the community. So I started getting like text messages from people who worked with me originally on it, saying, "Hey, someone's coming and they're messing it up. They're messing up your work." And they were getting so mad about this because they only knew me and the original context. They didn't know about any of this conversation with the mother, about the victim's favorite colors, and so on. Because like when I saw those changes made, I was like, you know what, that's great. I'm glad somebody was able to act on that and make those changes to honor the family's wishes and so on. But there was a whole group of people who, they were left out of that conversation, and all of a sudden they were expecting me to be mad about it with them. And I was like, when did this become my job to, you know, educate and fill in all these people on the gap that they missed? And anyways, so that whole experience is like ongoing even right now. And I think in some sense it validated for me that this artwork meant something to people, that it still means something to them because they're willing to be getting angry about it and texting me about it and sending me photos. And on the other hand, it kind of makes me feel like, yeah, in the future when I'm working on anything like this, I have to be, if I'm having a conversation with the victim's mother that's going to, you know, necessitate some changes to a public art piece, I mean that I have to do whatever I can to make sure that does not stay hidden information. And that, I don't know, a lot of times I'll do something that's big and public and I'll feel like, no one's really messing with it. Like nobody really cares what I did. You know, they don't care. No one's really paying attention. I sort of like live in that, like, oh, they don't really care about what I'm doing. Um, so I think that, yeah, that's a big way. That's something huge that's now changed in my approach to these types of projects. So yeah, a lot of failure mixed in with that and unseen, unforeseeable circumstances and things. But yeah, it's like happening right now, like too, as we speak. So it's been very interesting to go through that as an artist and as an activist, and kind of again, like I said, got to come back to what brought me into this whole thing in the first place, was that, you know, that unjust loss of life. And that was that's where I try to recenter myself and hopefully the other people who are angry too, and say, hey, this is why we're doing this. And if it made you mad to see this artwork got changed, then I I appreciate that you're paying attention to it. That's all I can say.
Here, Nina.
Sorry, I don't feel 100%. I will have to leave you. Apologies.
Oh, okay.
I wish I would be more vocal today, but I'm not. And we hope to see you again. Okay?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, sorry I
Bye.
was late. Nice to see you.
Hope you feel better, Nina.
I will. I'm an old.
Yeah, as we age, all of us have to deal with these things.
Yeah, I mean, she said she just had like a surgery or something too. So yeah, I'm surprised she was able to already get back on something like this. So I hope she feels better.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, she said she was seeing things.
Yeah, that could be.
That I have eyesight problems too, so I've learned to accommodate by just you see what you see.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually another sort of important part to all this is that, you know, as an artist or an activist, you see what you see. You know, I mean, and you obviously you don't see what you don't see, and it's hard to know when you know you exercise on your intent to do something positive, all the things that you are just simply unaware of, including how the legal system works.
Totally.
You know, and I mean, just following the trial. I mean, what on the surface can seem you know, a sort of cut and dry issue, you know, the loss of life of somebody, you know, in a particular situation. But that's not what the court is necessarily grappling with when they're actually in the legal proceeding, as we've seen in the trial, you know, most recently. You know, it wasn't about that in the end. It was about a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah.
And so it's so complicated, I think, to be predictive up front. But on the other hand, there is a kind of necessity to be as informed as one can be if they're going to take on this leadership role of activating communities, and getting them engaged in the discourse around whatever's going on in their worlds. It's a really complicated arena, to to operate in, I think, creatively. So, kudos.
Yeah, it requires like
Doing, but I think the most important thing, in many ways, is just to know what you don't know,
that's the challenge. Yeah.
and that is a huge challenge. But that's also a huge challenge in every discipline. It's true for everything. Yeah, I mentioned to Nina and Vanya right before you joined the call, and I'm working on this project on the Gila River. These sort of untold stories of the contested river system, and some of those stories obviously touch on the indigenous communities there. And one of the categories is the assimilation of Indian tribes into the Mormon Church, and how that transition happened and what happened is not a history that's been really shared very, very much. And so when you begin to talk to people who are directly affected by it, I just learned that Vanya's parents were Mormon.
My whole family, my mom got converted because of her boss around 1993, 1992, more or less. And my dad got converted because of the uh, misioneros, the guys who go and
Oh
knock
yeah,
on doors.
missionaries.
Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
And me and my sister were born into the church, and we actually have our certificates and everything. But it was something that we went and we didn't go, and we went and so on. When the last 2 years or so that we lived in Mexico City, we fully got out of it, and here in Leon, it just started appearing. But we, like, my parents are believers, me and my sister are agnostic, but we all agreed that it had some vibe of kind of toxic over it, because people there tend to pretend that they are like so pure and so good, and in fact they're not. They're mean and things like it. They just want to appear as nice people, and it started getting into our lives. Like, I was in junior high school, and I'm always been a bad student, and I'm trying not to, but I was failing classes, and they made me also go to church in the afternoons because they had classes for teenagers. And I remember not going one day because I don't know, I didn't go. And so the teacher was like, Vanya, I didn't see you yesterday, and you need to prioritize this. And I was like, prioritize church over, I think so. And yes, my mom started noticing that women in her group spent more time at church than in their homes or with their families or whatever. And it wasn't nice. That's not a way of worshiping God if you do believe.
Yeah, I wish that like organized religion didn't rely on hidden agendas. I mean, I'm like, then I would maybe get more involved in that. But I always have found that there's there's something more that you haven't signed up for, and it's not like yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, go back 100 years and begin to see how the evangelical missionary kind of based system evolved, particularly as it tested itself out on existing population. And there is some documentation, and you can see how culturally, how it was used to eviscerate the cultural identity of different communities and populations. And, you know, dress white, act white, speak white, be white, you know, and for whatever that meant within the context of that, of the particular religion. And it's not unique to Mormonism. It's kind of, you know, Catholicism and, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like some of the biggest sort of like, I don't know, how would I describe it? Yeah, kind of like institutional like gaslighting basically is you know, telling us in school this stuff about separation of church and state, and then we see in every courtroom you gotta like take an oath on that particular Bible. I mean, there's just so many um, sort of contradictions like that. And today it came up that I don't know if this is everywhere, but like in Minnesota, a lot of the police officers are actually referred to as peace officers.
Mhm.
And anyway, that's maybe less to do with religion, more to do with gaslighting. But yeah, I mean, you just find so much of um, yeah, just religion and government that are tied together, yet they kind of claim that they're not. But yeah, I think we all know that that's a very deep and historic tradition.
Well, the Supreme Court is now reviewing whether or not it's appropriate to use public funds to support.
Oh, I lost some sound there, but
Well, looking at whether the public funds should be used to also pay for religious education. So,
oh, interesting.
and
Yeah, so it's still very unresolved then, I guess.
oh, yeah, and becoming increasingly so, it seems, in the U.S. anyway,
Yeah.
as values seem to ebb and flow around conservatism. So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I was born and raised in Texas, and I feel like I probably could not have gotten into college without like paying respects to the like Christian uh,
Hmm.
sort of underlying power structure of my neighborhood, of my city, of my high school. Um, I felt like I kind of had to. I was involved in just even non-religious activities that would be held inside of a church so often. It was just like that was the norm, and that always made me look good to those kind of powers that be when you're a kid, whether it's like you need a recommendation letter from your counselor or you need um, just approval or you're trying to get your first job in high school or something like that. And it's just like there's kind of a tacit unsaid thing in that community where I grew up where it's like if you're affiliated with the church in some positive way, then then you're good. And if you're actively not involved with the church, then we have some extra questions for you. Um, I was even turned down for a teaching job,
Sorry.
like literally for not having. I emailed. They asked me over email, like, "Are you Christian?" And I said no, and they said, "Yeah, then we can't hire you here." And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's pretty in your face here in Texas. I mean,
Yeah.
I was in high school doing summer research in biomechanics at a university, like program, and the professor who is the leader of the lab like during our lunch breaks and stuff, he would just blatantly like jump into these like conversion conversations with me about like Southern Baptist churches that he wanted me to explore. And I was like, I'm here doing, you know, biomechanics research. I mean, it's just completely uh, off topic for starters, but it just seems like he expected that from his students, that they would be receptive to the faith. And I was like, what is going on here? But I had so many little experiences like that that really, for a long time, made me want to leave Texas. I was like, seems like everywhere I go, I'm running into this, and it just kind of puts me off and makes me feel unaccepted and unwelcum.
But what's curious about it is that, you know, we find that kind of behavior a little abhorrent, you know, but you could make the argument that that person is just being an activist, right?
I was like, they could be saying the same thing about
science. They're using science to kind of get at something they deeply care about and want to see happen in the world. Just as artists use art to convince people about things that they want to convince to do things in the world. And I'm not justifying it. I'm just going back to this point of view about you only see what you see, you know what you know, and how dangerous it is, how dangerous activism is. It is so incredibly dangerous. It can cause such difficulty for people, you know, when they're being asked to, if the activism is in part asking people to take sides, you know, to choose what side they're on. And is there another kind of activism that really is more discursive? It's about creating, you know, a dialogue or a conversation about something rather than coming to conclusions about it. And this, I mean, I think there are different strategies for how to go about art and activism that doesn't rely on the camouflage. I mentioned this last week, the sort of camouflage of the arts of being somehow honest and truthful and and you know, an expression of goodwill and making the world better. That can be a veneer that is very it can cover up the, you know, it makes the intent seem maybe more I don't know what the right word here is, you know, but just like science can do that, you know, or science, the truthfulness of science can be the veneer that you hide behind. Not you, but can be hidden behind.
You know, that, like you talked about, why can't activism be something that promotes a like healthy discourse? And that reminded me when I was on the road, like all across the country last summer, there was a activist also with me. He had started something called the Carry On movement, and his philosophy was exactly that. He said at all these marches and all these protests, what he feels he's there to do is to set aside groups of people to just have like conversations, like literally sitting in a circle with people that do have disagreements. And so every time we would be at a different city and supporting a different march or making murals or whatever, he was always getting on the microphone or speaking to the crowd and inviting people who disagree to get together and actually have those, what he would call them, symposiums, mini symposiums. Okay. Oh, Vanya, I see your note.
As do I. So we, you know, we.
The camera.
Yeah. So I thought that was
the
cool.
session will keep recording us until you leave. It doesn't matter if I leave.
Yeah. I have
Okay.
to take off here in a minute anyway. So it's.
Cool. Nice to see. Yeah, nice to see you guys.
Are you leaving now, Vanya?